All right. Today I have with me a good friend, my good friend, Kelly Helmuth.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. Kelly is a chief experience officer at Golden, and Kelly's an experienced chief operating officer with a demonstrated history of working in the management consulting industry and is highly skilled in business planning, execution, team building, media relations, and market research. She was also the co-founder and CEO of Bestest. She was also the COO of the Ledgmore Group and managing director at Showcase Publishing. She spent many years in business innovation, and she facilitates cross-pollination of ideas between startups and multinational companies. I'm very happy and thankful to call you a friend, Kelly.
Likewise, Alani, and what a pleasure to get to see your face today.
Awesome. So I'm going to get right to it. For what in life do you feel most grateful?
It's a profound question, and there are about 100 answers I could give you, Alani, but I will tell you that at this moment in time, the thing I'm most grateful for is my mental health. So I wasn't always in a great place, and I think that's largely why I went to work for Golden and now 2 stealth startups in the wellness and mental health space. But without that, without being in your right mind or in a healthy place, the rest, you can have the trappings of a successful life. You can have a lot of friends, but if you are not in a good place mentally, then I feel like you don't really have much of anything. So the thing that I am most grateful for, as you ask me this question in this moment in time, is mental well-being.
That's fascinating and not surprising because, we were talking earlier before we started to record that to be without friends is the greatest form of poverty. And poverty is something that we definitely feel. And it's deeply profound to appreciate one's mental health in that broad spectrum. So at the current moment, where do you think mental health, where is that intersection between mental health and our professional lives? Because I think it's the one area that's often overlooked when it comes to work. The idea of, you see people bragging on social media about how many hours they worked or how hard they're working, abandoning their families, posting photos of their, computer screen saying I was working all weekend. And, is that a badge of honor to sacrifice your mental health for anything else, let alone work?
No, I think we need to stop romanticizing the hustle. That has been a dominant sort of ethos over the last 10 or 20 years. And in my opinion, the pandemic cast light on the fact that we are whole individuals. So when we come to work, there's no separation between church and state. There's no separation between home me and work me. And the pandemic made that abundantly clear. And also we got an insight into how people live and work. And in fact, a lot of, so funny because CEOs, so many leaders, are under the impression that if they can't see the whites of their eyes, they're not working. And the truth is that people ended up working for more, working from home. And we didn't have those old boundaries that existed. And so I think this is actually inviting a really good conversation over vulnerability, over recognizing an entire person, not just the work self, and conversations all just along those lines of, if I'm not in a good place at work, that actually affects how I interact with my family. And if I'm not in a good place with my family, that interacts with how I work. And so finally, I feel like executives are finally, and granted, we have the scientific evidence that this is the case, and maybe anecdotally people have known it in their guts for a long time. But what I'm very pleased about, Alani, is that the pandemic brought a lot of this to light.
That's awesome. So that leads me to my next question. Do you think artificial intelligence is going to help that, or do you think it's just another backdoor that technology is, using to get into our lives, and we are yet to see the blowback from that?
No, actually, I think there's a fantastic place for technology and AI, and it was funny because originally that scared me. And I don't know if you saw recently the founder of Koko, Koko.
Mm-hmm.
They used sort of it might have been ChatGPT, but it was a bot essentially, and it was individuals consented to this, by the way. Used a bot for mental health text responses on the fly. All of those responses were monitored by a human being, and the sort of operator, if you will, would say, yes, I want to send it as is. Oh, no, I want to make that better. Or no, I don't want to send it, and I'm going to type something. And what they found is that the AI bot was received well, overwhelmingly well, like 80% of the time, and it cut the response time in half, actually more than in half.
Wow.
And the only thing that people were somewhat rubbed the wrong way by was the fact that it didn't come across as sort of authentically human. The advice was fantastic. It was sort of feigning empathy of, oh, I know that if you've messaged and said something, I'm having a hard time dealing with this change, and the AI bot would say, making change is difficult, and it's very, very demanding on you, and blah blah blah. But it was hard for the recipient to say, well, they really understand my position because it's a computer or it's technology, and even though their responses are valid and good, a lot of times they lacked that empathy, that emotional connection. And so that was the only complaint. But I actually think that we are going to see a lot more AI in the mental health space. And already we see, there's so many wearables and trackable things. So technology has made a pretty deep, let's say it's penetrated the wellness space already quite a lot. You can see how long you slept and how deep. So we'll see more of that.
So do you then think the risk of turning humans into, let me rephrase that. Do you think there is a risk then that the technology will dislodge the human component? So you have to humanize conversation. So we're trading authenticity for validation, right? So we have the situation where a lot of parents, for example, Netflix and Hulu raise their kids. They come home, they're stressed, they just give the kid a tablet, go watch something on Netflix, right? And now with AI, everything from parenting to school, we have entire college courses where the kids are just going to ChatGPT to write their papers for them. And this has been...
But also, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Well, there is intellectual rigor required. I mean, learning how to learn is something, but simply relying on AI to things like GPS, for example, where, I've seen kids who can't even read a map. It's a good skill to have,
Oh yes, no, don't even get me started on the life skills that I believe kids should have, and they are poorly lacking in right now.
Things like writing with taking a pen to paper, those very basic skills. I think that's my position now. We are technologists. You have ran software companies, so you understand the value that technology brings, to the world as a whole. But the risk I see there is, how do we balance, AI, automation, technology with still keeping the human component present? That's the only risk that I have so far been really thinking about. Like, where do we draw the line? Where do we ensure?
And I don't think that will become evident, Alani, for many years to come. I believe that to the extent that we can use technology as an enabler, so like I mentioned, some of the wearables, get data gathering, sleep information, for example, but also an enabler. I'll use this example. One of the stealth projects I'm working on is using technology to bring employees together in sort of shared quests. And it's gamifying that, my background with the gamification of these things. So it's gamifying it. It's an enabler towards certain ends that concern well-being. And it's a facilitator. So it would be far more difficult to do this stuff without technology. What I think we need to be careful of, particularly in the mental health space, is a lot of companies, what I saw when I was working in the States here with Golden, is a lot of companies would give their employees an app, Calm app or Headspace, and say, here, go meditate. And, that's perpetuating exactly the problem that they need to solve, which is I'm feeling isolated. I'm feeling disconnected. And you want me to go do something on my own and with my phone? No. And so at Golden, our whole method was about bringing people together to have a shared experience, to do a together action. Even though you could do it independently, you weren't doing it asynchronously, although that's another conversation. So to the extent that you can use technology as an enabler, as a facilitator, I absolutely think it has a place.
That's interesting, and I'm going to pay attention to that because I'm super, super curious. I have seen some very interesting demos on some demo days, and you see some of the things being cooked up behind the scenes. Some exciting, some scary, actually. Which leads me to my next question: what are you cooking up right now?
Okay, well,
I know you have your hands in a lot of things, so to the degree you can share, what's going on with Kelly today?
Well, sure. So I felt really fortunate at Golden because it was founded by Julie Wald. She is a renowned author and thought leader in the well-being space. She was meditation guru to the stars, to celebrities, and was really one of the first folks in that space. It was born out of 9/11. The company was born out of 9/11 and a lot of executives dealing with that trauma in New York City. And it was almost like now 20 years later. So this company has been around 20 years and they were really at the vanguard. And then finally, a lot of the rest of corporate America caught on 20 years later. So I actually feel like mental health and even technology-enabled mental health is in a really good place in the United States. Now, where I've set my sights, Alani, is further afield, where we have other countries in the world where we've made a lot of progress, 20 years of progress, for example, in the last 5 years in a lot of locations with, everybody having mobile phones and like all sorts of different Wi-Fi technologies. And if I can go in and make an impact and bring something that is evidence-based and it's established and I've built it and I know it works here, let's bring it other places in the world. Let's translate it to other cultures. That's where my sights are set right now, Lonnie.
Super cool. So what's your most treasured memory?
I have a lot of memories. Most treasured. And I feel like whenever somebody would ask that question, the respondent would want to qualify it of like most treasured with family, most treasured at work. Most treasured moment. Mine would be this one experience that I had in Cinque Terre. And it was walking along Cinque Terre, for the listeners that don't know, are 5 towns in Italy that are on the coastline. And you can take the train between them, but you can also hike between them. And it's a lovely experience. And I did that when I was probably 20 years old. And I just remember the lemons being as big as grapefruits. I had never seen anything that big. The smell in the air. And at that moment in time saying, oh my gosh, this is the best moment of my life. And I think back on that a lot. And I was with friends that I was in school with overseas. And it was just this moment, you talk about intersectionality a lot. It's this intersection of being fully present, of being with people whose company I very much enjoyed, being in an environment that was supportive and beautiful and really inspiring. And then I think not having some other worries. And so to me, somebody might say, well, the birth of their child or their wedding or a moment with a parent. And so to me, in a sense, this moment may seem insignificant, but it was significant to me because it emphasized that amazing, amazing zest for life you can feel when you are fully present.
Being present in the right company, in the right place, and a little bit of fortune, I guess.
Yeah. And now the challenge is taking that and extending it to the circumstances where you wish you weren't there or weren't with those people or weren't in that environment.
That's the pendulum swinging in the other direction.
Mm-hmm. Taking that piece with you. Yes.
If only you could take it with you. So what advice would you give your teenage self?
So listen, I love all your questions. I would probably tell my teenage self to stress less, worry less. My Irish, my dear, recently deceased Irish stepdad had a great saying when I was younger, and he said, "If you worry, you die, and if you don't worry, you still die," which sounds like that charming, like Irish, optimism.
Irish humor.
Yeah, but suffice it to say that really stuck with me. Of like, well, you can get yourself all spun up into something, into a tizzy, or you can kind of just sit back and roll with it. And that's something that I am particularly challenged at doing, just rolling with it. And so I think I would just say it's all not as important as you think it is.
Nothing is that serious.
Nothing is that serious. That's a great phrase.
That's awesome. So in that spirit, then, if you could change anything about the way you were raised, what would that be?
So another fascinating question. I'm an only child, and my mom used to say, "Oh, I wish I had given you a sibling. I wish you had a sibling." And I said, well, I don't have a frame of reference of that world. I don't know that world, so I don't know what I'm missing out on. I don't think I am. And so asking me, I say that because your question is sort of parallel of, well, what did I feel I missed? I don't know, because my lived experience is only my experience. So I don't know what I missed out on. I don't know what I would change. In fact, I kind of take a very opposite approach of just really celebrating with gratitude the fact that I got to live in different countries and travel with my family, and that my dear mom had no problem taking me out of school if it was a powder day at the ski resort. And so I would say I look back not wanting to have changed anything, but really instead, I think, valuing and appreciating what did happen, because even the bad stuff has made me into the person I am today, and the resilient person that I am today.
Erin, so what then is your most terrible memory? I don't want to say I know this one, but I will let you guide me.
Oh, I have lots of terrible memories, but I think, and that sounds bad. It's like, oh, how many times in business when cash flow is tight, or if business disagreements with business partners, not vetting people well, all of them is. I always said I made every mistake in the book, and I think I only just made it 49% of the time because somehow fortune favored how things worked out. But the worst moment, again, this is a funny thing. I just remember getting off an airplane in Orlando for a conference, and I had a cable knit sweater on. I stood up, and somehow another passenger had gotten gum all over my sweater. I was like, oh, well, no big deal. I'll change. Only to arrive at the luggage carousel and have the luggage spinning around, and mine is, lo and behold, it's not there. I'm speaking, I'm presenting, none of my stuff is there. I get to the hotel, and it's on the Disney property, and they put me in a room right next to the ice machine. It's extremely loud. Technology's not working. I call down, I say, hey, is there any way you can move my room? And they said, no, we're fully booked, but have a magical day. And it was that was not catastrophic. Certainly, like my dad dying in my arms would be like one of the worst moments. But I guess this is a very heightened moment in my memory because everything was literally, if it could have gone wrong, it was going wrong. It was Murphy's Law was just ruling the day. And to have that front desk clerk say, have a magical day. I just felt rubbing it in my face. And I thought, if only you knew. And so, at the moment, I just thought things were catastrophic. But I've learned a lot about catastrophizing and catastrophic thinking since then.
Clearly, for sure. Mm-hmm. So, who was your favorite cartoon character as a kid?
I really love the Smurfs. Do they count? And they are.
They count.
They count. I don't even remember. Did they talk? But I just remember having a collection of them, loving them. They're blue and they were just so unusual, and they're Belgian, and that was where my dad lived. And so maybe it was a bit of a connection in that way. But I wish I had something deeper. Like, I loved Bugs Bunny or Pepe Le Pew. Actually, no, I think Pepe Le Pew's been canceled. So
interesting. So do you think humans, technology, altruism, and just trying to better our lives and the world as a whole, do you think morality comes from within or outside of ourselves, or do you think there's always an agenda?
I'm not sure I have an answer to that, Alani. I think maybe throughout life, my thoughts on that have changed. I love reading. You're going to think this is kind of humorous, but I love reading about any instances of feral children. Temple Grandin, who is an autistic animal behavioralist, has written a lot of books. She mentions some of the encounters with feral children, those who really truly have been raised without human touch, without human intervention, very much Mowgli from the Jungle Book sort of scenarios, and that there is a sense of a higher being and a higher purpose, because otherwise, how can you really test that assumption? And I know your question is about morality and altruism and other things like that, but I'm referring to this as an example because you can't effectively have a test case because very few people have grown up without exposure to the church, a parental oversight, all sorts of influencing or what do they call them? Just influencing factors, let's say. So the studies that I've read indicate that there is something natural. I also love the instances of twins or triplets separated at birth and learning how much is nature and how much is nurture. And I think that does speak to your question a little bit, but the jury is still out on that.
The jury is out. Mm-hmm. So what then do you value most in a friendship?
It's funny because I don't know that this would be my answer today, but I know that if you would have asked me this question 10 years ago, my response would have been reciprocity. Nobody likes a one-sided relationship. And when I say reciprocity, it's reciprocity in terms of, I guess, emotional availability, time, interest, caring. So that would have been my answer 10 years ago. What would be my answer today? What do I most value? I have to say I've zenned out a lot. So I enter things with just a lot more. Let's look at the positives. Let's look at what's additive, not what we're missing or what's wrong. And I really just try not to qualify things too much. Let me get back to you on that. I will get back to you during the show, okay? The thing I most value in friendship.
Well, I think it's a shared responsibility. But it's interesting. It goes back to the journey of life, because we translate things very differently as we evolve, because as humans, we're in this near constant state of evolution. So what we translate as, hey, here are the things that I need in a friendship or a relationship, whatever the situation is. In a few years that may change, because situations change, people evolve, people grow. Your wants, needs, interests, curiosity, those things change over time. And there's that emotional elasticity. And it's this subconsciously powerful plane of existence that even we don't know we're living it. And sometimes it might seem fleeting or insignificant, but it's ever present. But it only comes with, time is that constant because it insists on itself.
And I would add to that, so how I approach friendships, not necessarily what I value most, but how I see them is, somebody once said, friendships and all relationships for that matter, whether it's a business relationship, romantic relationship, or friendship, are for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And the reason sometimes they come into your life, it just happened to be the person that you needed that information from, or that experience from, or there was a reason. The season is those friends who are maybe with you for quite literally a season, a ski season or something like that, or 4 years, college life, and then a lifetime. Those are the people that are with you through the long haul. And I think if we actually accept that not everybody is a lifetime friend, sometimes they're there for a reason or a season. And that's cool. We just have to accept that and acknowledge it.
All right. I will accept that answer. Well, our friendship is the season that seemingly never ends.
Yes. Yeah, no, so far, it's a season. It's a season. I mean, it might evolve into a lifetime. We're on that track. I mean, I've known you for almost 10 years, Alani.
Actually, over.
Really, over?
In 2012, and it's 2023.
Well, I will also say, I don't know about for you, but for me, the pandemic was a little bit of a mind eraser.
My God, Kelly, you're killing me. All right, that's awesome. That is awesome. Well, I know this, we had about a half hour, to go through, some of those items. You're a very, very, very busy person. And out of many things, I'm always grateful for is whenever you're gracious enough to give me some of your time. So thank you very much, for being a part of this.
It was my absolute pleasure. I would love to continue the conversation. So
absolutely. And I would love to definitely have you back on. There's plenty more to talk about. And I'm pretty sure you will have many more things coming up as always. So thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Alani.